They say that when God finished creating the world, there was too much beauty left to fit anywhere. So he opened his hands over the Pacific and let it fall. Every island that was born was a fragment of that divine excess. Every reef that emerged from the depths was a sentence God whispered to the waters before silence took over the planet. French Polynesia was not made to be easily found. It was hidden, placed at the center of the largest ocean on Earth, like a secret that humanity would take millennia to deserve knowing. Beneath that surface, the sun touches with golden fingers. There is a world that defies everything we know about life, about time, and about the limits of what is possible. What you are about to see will permanently change the way you look at the ocean. At the absolute heart of the South Pacific Ocean, approximately 3,600 miles from the California coast and 2,700 miles from New Zealand, there exists an archipelago so isolated that the distance itself seems like a deliberate protection. French Polynesia spreads across a maritime area equivalent to all of Europe, yet only 1,500 square miles are dry land. "118 islands and atolls form this French overseas territory, divided into 5 groups. The Society Islands, where Tahiti and Bora Bora reign. The Marquesas, to the north, with their volcanic mountains cutting through clouds. The Tuamotu, an immense necklace of coral atolls. The Gambier and the Australs, to the south. The climate is tropical, warm and humid, with temperatures between 79 and 88 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year. The Pacific waters here oscillate between 82 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface, creating an incubator of underwater life with no parallel on the planet. This is not merely a destination. It is an ecosystem that breathes. Even before the dawn light touches the surface of Fakarava's lagoon, the ocean is already in motion. In the depths of 130 feet below the atoll's southern pass, a living wall of more than 700 black-tip reef sharks, Carcharhinus melanopterus, and gray reef sharks, Carcharhinus amblyrhynchos, holds its position like sentinels of a gateway that few dare to cross. It is not blind instinct that gathers them there. It is collective strategy refined over millions of years of evolution, a predatory dance as precise as any human choreography could ever aspire to be. The Fakarava Pass is a UNESCO-recognized biosphere reserve, and within it occurs one of the largest cooperative shark hunting events documented in any ocean. The flow of currents creates a natural corridor where fish have nowhere to escape. The sharks do not need speed, they need patience. And patience they master with cold and calculated mastery. Every movement is millimetric. Every acceleration is definitive. The ocean has no room for error here, and the oldest inhabitants of this world know that rule better than any other living being. The giant manta ray, Mobula birostris, does not swim, it flies. With a wingspan that can exceed 23 feet from tip to tip, this being of cartilage and elegance crosses the currents of Polynesia as if water were merely denser air, as if gravity had forgotten to include it in its contracts. Off the Marquesas Islands, between the months of July and October, groups of up to 30 mantas converge at precise points in the ocean where plankton accumulates in extraordinary concentrations. They open their cephalic fins, those horn-shaped structures on their heads, and filter tons of water in continuous spiral motion, transforming each mouthful of ocean into a meal invisible to the naked eye. The brain of the giant manta ray is proportionally the largest among all cartilaginous fish on the planet, and studies published in the Journal of Fish Biology confirm cognitive abilities that include individual recognition and self-recognition behavior. When a manta looks at you underwater, it is not the empty gaze of a fish. It is the serene assessment of a being that has already lived long enough to fear nothing. What it sees in us, no one has yet been able to answer. There is a color that has no name in English. It exists only in the lagoons of Bora Bora, in a turquoise spectrum that oscillates between the impossible and the divine, generated by the exact combination of shallow depth, white pulverized coral sand, and the angle of the sun over 16 degrees south latitude. Beneath that luminous surface, the coral gardens of French Polynesia harbor more than 450 catalogued species of hard and soft corals, forming structures that grow at the rate of half an inch to nearly an inch per year. Architectures that took centuries to acquire the form that today's eyes contemplate. Corals are not plants, not rocks, and not animals in the sense that humans understand. They are colonies of polyps, anthozoa, each one smaller than a grain of rice, that secrete calcium carbonate and together build cathedrals that host 25% of all marine species on Earth. The reef is not a backdrop. It is a living city that never sleeps, never stops, never ceases to build. And all that grandeur begins in a being that fits entirely on a fingernail. The Napoleon fish, Chilenus undulatus, carries on its face a story its species never asked to tell. That frontal protrusion that forms in adult males, the gibba, a hump of tissue that grows with age, is simultaneously its identity and its sentence, as it has made this fish one of the most hunted in Asian live fish markets, where specimens can be sold for values equivalent to $136 per pound. In the protected waters of French Polynesia, where fishing for this animal is severely restricted, it is still possible to find individuals exceeding 6.5 feet in length and weighing close to 420 pounds, a rarity that in other parts of the Indo-Pacific has been virtually wiped from human sight. The Napoleon fish is a sequential hermaphrodite. It is born female and, at a certain stage of life, can become male, a biological transition that defies categories and that nature executes with elegant indifference. It sleeps inside reef crevices at night, wrapped in a bubble of mucus. It secretes around its own body like an invisible protective cocoon. Existences like this remind us that life has always found ways to survive that human imagination would never have conceived first. In the depths between 160 and 800 feet below the surface of the Tuamotu, there exists a zone where sunlight dissolves into blue shadow and where creatures that have never seen the sun build their entire existences in relative darkness. The soldierfish, Mirapristys bernti, and squirrelfish, Sargocentron spiniferum, dominate the caves and coral ledges in this permanent twilight, their disproportionately large eyes like two moons adapted to capture every available fragment of light. This is where the reef shows its nocturnal face, completely different from the colorful and bustling spectacle that daylight reveals above. Nocturnal predators replace diurnal ones with chronological precision, as colorful reef fish seek shelter, giant moray eels, Gymnothorax javanicus, with their bodies reaching nearly 10 feet, slide out of their lairs like shadows with teeth. The Pacific day octopus, Octopus cyanea, begins its hunt, changing color every fraction of a second in a camouflage spectacle that human military technology still studies with declared envy. The reef never rests, it merely changes shifts. The green sea turtle, Colonia midas, has existed for 95 million years. It survived the asteroid that erased the dinosaurs. It survived ice ages, continental shifts, mass extinctions that wiped out 90% of life on the planet. And now, in a geologically microscopic interval, it faces a threat that no natural event ever imposed with such speed: the destruction caused by a single species. On the beaches of the Marquesas Islands and the atoll of Tetiaroa, the same atoll that Marlon Brando purchased and that today houses one of the most advanced conservation projects in the South Pacific. Green sea turtles arrive every 2 to 5 years to nest. Guided by a magnetic field, they memorize the moment they are born. each female can deposit up to 800 eggs in a single reproductive season. Of the hatchlings that emerge from the sand at 3 in the morning and run toward the lunar reflection in the ocean, fewer than 1 in 1,000 will reach adulthood. The universe gave this reptile evolutionary immortality and individual fragility at the same time, and it is in that contradiction that all the poetry and all the tragedy of the turtle resides. When the spinner dolphin, Stanella longirostris, leaps and spins in the air over the lagoons of Moorea, it is not merely exuberance, it is communication, social navigation, and possible neurological regulation happening simultaneously in a single graceful gesture. These dolphins form groups called superpods that can gather more than 1,000 individuals, creating a collective sonar field so powerful it is capable of mapping surrounding reefs with centimeter precision. The lagoon of Moorea, with its coral barrier and protected passes, has become one of the most studied sites in the world for cetacean behavior, and researchers from the University of California documented their patterns of play, cultural learning, and behavioral transmission across generations, what scientists call, with all necessary caution, animal culture. The humpback whale, Megaptera novae angliae, which migrates from its feeding waters in Antarctica to give birth and nurse in the warm waters of Polynesia between July and October, transforms the South Pacific into a nursery of 33,000 pounds of maternal love. And the male's song, a composition that changes every season, that all males of the same population learn and modify together in real time, is the only form of collectively evolving music outside of the human species. The coconut crab, Birgus latro, is the heaviest land arthropod on the planet. It can exceed 9 pounds and have a leg span of nearly 3 feet, and it inhabits the most remote islands of Polynesia with the sovereignty of a being that has never needed to fear anything. Its compound eyes see colors in the ultraviolet spectrum invisible to humans. Its claws generate a pinching force of up to 740 pounds, enough to split a ripe coconut as if it were paper, hence the common name it carries like a title. On full moon nights in the Tuamotu Islands, dozens of these crustaceans emerge from burrows dug in the sand and climb palm trees with a dexterity that seems biologically impossible for an animal with an exoskeleton. But evolution did not ask permission from logic when building this being. The female descends to the ocean's edge to release her eggs into the water, then returns to land. The only contact this terrestrial crustacean maintains with the sea from which its ancestors emerged hundreds of millions of years ago. There is a philosophical melancholy in that gesture, the brief return to the point of departure that will never again be home. There are black corals, Antipatharia, in the depths of French Polynesia that are more than 4,000 years old. Ocean trees more ancient than most recorded human civilizations that grew in silence while empires rose and disappeared on the surface of the world. These colonial organisms, which can reach nearly 10 feet in height in branched formations resembling bushes, function as biological archives. Each growth layer records the ocean conditions of its time, including temperature, acidity, and chemical composition of the water. Scientists from the Université de la Polynésie Française use these structures as paleoclimatic witnesses, extracting data about the Pacific Ocean that no human instrument could have collected centuries ago. Around these millennial colonies, the environment is different, more complex, more stratified, richer in rare invertebrates that found in these structures their only possible home. The black coral is not black from death. It is black from pigment, alive and quiet in a darkness it knows better than the light. Ages like these remind us that the ocean has a much longer memory than ours. The mimic octopus, Thaumaoctopus mimicus, though more common in the Indo-Pacific, has behavioral relatives in Polynesian waters. And the study of the local day octopus, Octopus cyanea, revealed imitation capabilities and behavioral adaptation that redefined what biologists call invertebrate intelligence. In milliseconds, this animal can reconfigure its entire skin surface, color, texture, pattern, and luminosity through chromatophores, iridophores, and papillae that respond directly to the central nervous system, without the intermediation of hormones or conscious thought as we understand it. Even more extraordinary, 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are not in the central brain, but distributed throughout its 8 arms, meaning each arm has autonomous processing capacity, a decentralized nervous system that modern robotics has been attempting to replicate for decades without achieving the same result. The octopus has 3 hearts, blue blood oxygenated by hemocyanin instead of hemoglobin, and a life that rarely exceeds 2 years, an existence of concentrated genius that the ocean burns quickly and without ceremony. The tiger shark, Galiocerdo cuvier, carries in its serrated jaw a reputation that the media built with more exaggeration than fact, but which its biology sustains with a truth more interesting than any sensationalism. It is the only truly omnivorous shark in the ocean, capable of consuming everything from turtles and dolphins to rubber tires and porcelain plates, objects literally found in stomachs analyzed during scientific studies. In the waters around Rangiroa, the second largest atoll in the world by lagoon surface, tiger sharks patrol the Avatoru Pass with a regularity that researchers use to monitor ecosystem health as a whole. Where tiger sharks exist in stable numbers, the reef is balanced. The removal of this apex predator from any marine ecosystem triggers a cascade effect that can destroy entire reefs in less than a decade, a phenomenon documented in multiple Indo-Pacific regions where shark fishing was permissive. The predator at the top of the food chain is not the enemy of the reef. It is the silent architect of its survival. In a world where plankton moves oceans, the copepod, Calanoida, is the link that no documentary camera has ever filmed with the reverence it deserves. Organisms less than 1/10 of an inch in length, invisible to the naked eye, perform in the waters of Polynesia one of the most impressive vertical migrations in biology. They rise hundreds of feet to the surface at nightfall to feed on phytoplankton and descend at dawn to escape predators, a biological elevator that processes carbon on a planetary scale. This vertical movement, multiplied by quadrillions of organisms in all oceans, pumps carbon from surface layers to the depths in a process called the biological carbon pump, which regulates the global climate more efficiently than any carbon capture technology human ingenuity has yet produced. The phytoplankton, Prochlorococcus, of the oligotrophic waters of the South Pacific generates approximately 50% of all the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere, more than all tropical forests combined. We breathe the ocean without realizing it. We are made of Pacific far more than we suspect. The spiny lobster, Panulirus penicillatus, organizes its annual migrations in queues of up to 60 individuals, each one touching with its antennae the abdomen of the one ahead, in a column that advances across the ocean floor like an articulated train of chitin and determination. This behavior, first filmed in the Caribbean and later documented also in the waters of the Tuamotu, still puzzles researchers. The Q formation reduces hydrodynamic drag and allows the group to move more rapidly with less individual energy expenditure, a collective engineering solution that nature discovered without engineers. In the reef crevices of Fakarava, during the day, spiny lobsters gather in communal shelters where density can reach 20 individuals per square yard, an apparent contradiction for an animal known for its independence. Research shows this aggregation is not accidental. The presence of multiple antennae at the entrance of the den creates a highly effective chemical and tactile defense against predators, including the octopus, whose tentacles are repelled by the synchronized movement of the spiny antennae. Solidarity in the ocean always has an evolutionary explanation, but that makes it no less impressive. There is a creature that lives in French Polynesia that most people will never see, even if they spend their entire lives diving in these waters: the white umbilicus nautilus, Nautilus macromphalus, a direct relative of animals that inhabited the oceans 500 million years ago, before the existence of dinosaurs, before amphibians, before any vertebrate had dared to look toward dry land. This cephalopod lives between 600 and 1,600 feet in depth during the day, emerging at night to feed on carcasses and decomposing crustaceans on the steepest slopes of volcanic islands. Its spiral shell, divided internally into chambers filled with nitrogen gas that regulate buoyancy like a biological submarine, is one of the most studied examples of the golden ratio in nature. A geometry that mathematicians and architects have analyzed for centuries with growing admiration. The nautilus has no calcified jaw like other cephalopods. It uses a chitin structure called a radula to grind its food. Its nervous system is comparatively simple, yet it has survived more mass extinctions than any vertebrate lineage. Simplicity in the deep ocean is sometimes the most sophisticated form of persistence. The most silent and simultaneously most explosive event that occurs in the waters of French Polynesia happens once a year, on a specific night determined by the full moon of October or November: the mass spawning of corals. Within minutes of sunset, millions of polyps from dozens of different species, each one the size of a grain of rice, simultaneously release their gamete bundles, creating a pink mist that rises toward the surface like an inverted snowfall, like a dream of fertility that the ocean has on the same night every year. This synchrony is not accident. It is chemical coordination mediated by the luminous hormones of phytoplankton, by the tidal cycle, and by water temperature, a biological equation whose precision rivals the most sophisticated control systems human engineering has built. In the following hours, the surface of the lagoon is covered in a thick layer of coral sperm and eggs that fish consume voraciously, and those that escape form planulae, free larvae that drift for weeks before finding a calcium carbonate surface where they will anchor the next generation of the reef. The reproduction of coral is an act of collective faith in the future of an entire ecosystem. The clownfish, Amphiprion pyridoraion, immortalized in the popular imagination by animated productions, hides beneath its colorful charm one of the most fascinating evolutionary stories of the reef. Its entire existence depends on a symbiosis with the sea anemone, Stichodactyla gigantea, whose tentacles carry stinging cells lethal to any other fish, but not to the clownfish, which develops a protective layer of chemically differentiated mucus that neutralizes the firing mechanism of the anemone's nematocysts. In exchange for protection, the clownfish actively defends the anemone against predators such as the butterfly fish, Chaetodon, performs movements that aerate the water around the tentacles, and even removes parasites from the host's tissue. A partnership so balanced that the removal of either side compromises the survival of the other. Even more unsettling, the clownfish is hierarchical and a sequential hermaphrodite. The largest individual in the group is always female. If she dies, the largest male changes sex and assumes the dominant position, a biological succession that nature operates with a coldness that no human monarchy would dare to copy. The spotted eagle ray, Itobatus ocellatus, with its wingspan of up to 10 feet and its long, flexible tail that can be mistaken for a whip of cartilage, performs above the lagoon of Bora Bora, an underwater flight of absolute elegance that has no visual equivalent in any other animal of this ocean. Its pectoral fins undulate at slow and hypnotic frequencies that propel it with minimal resistance, and its eyes positioned laterally on its flattened head ensure a visual field of nearly 360 degrees, an advantage any predator would envy. It feeds primarily on bivalves and crustaceans buried in the sand, which it detects through electroreceptors distributed along its snout, the so-called ampullae of Lorenzini, capable of capturing electric fields of less than 1 nanovolt per centimeter. On the sandy bottoms of Polynesian lagoons, where sight reaches nothing of immediate interest, the eagle ray finds invisible banquets that only it knows exist. Existing with senses that others lack is, both in the ocean and beyond it, a form of solitude and advantage carried together, inseparable. The microbial biodiversity of French Polynesia's waters likely contains the highest concentration of still uncatalogued bacterial and viral marine genomes of any tropical ocean, a genetic library whose volumes no one has yet read. Studies from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography identified in the lagoons of the Tuamotu chemolithotrophic archaea that produce energy from inorganic compounds without sunlight, reconfiguring the understanding of life's limits on the planet. These microorganisms build biofilms on coral surfaces that function as collective immune systems for the reef, protecting polyps from pathogens and responding to environmental variations such as temperature fluctuations that precede bleaching episodes. Coral bleaching, the expulsion of zooxanthellae algae, Symbiodiniaceae, that live in polyp tissues and provide up to 90% of their energy through photosynthesis, is the most well-documented biological response to thermal stress in tropical oceans, and the lagoons of Polynesia have recorded increasing events with every El Niño cycle since 1982. The reef is listening to the planet's changes, and it is responding with the only language it knows, color that disappears. The white-tip reef shark, Triinodon obesus, is the only shark in the world capable of resting motionless on the ocean floor for hours, an ability that challenged for decades the belief that all sharks needed continuous movement to breathe. In the coral caves and sand platforms of the passes at Whakarava and Rangiroa, it is possible to find up to 30 of these animals stacked on top of each other in a collective repose that seems improbable for predators of their stature. They actively pump water through their gills while remaining stationary, using buccal musculature instead of depending on swimming motion, an adaptation that conserves energy and allows them to await peak tidal hours to hunt with far less effort and far greater efficiency. Their geographic fidelity is exceptional. Satellite tagging studies conducted by the Polynesia Mana Association revealed that individuals return to the same caves at the same hours for consecutive years, routines so fixed that local divers recognize them individually and have given them names. There is something disturbingly familiar in that devotion to place, in that attachment to the territory one calls home. When the sun touches the horizon of the South Pacific and paints the sky in colors that exist in no other latitude on the planet, the ocean of French Polynesia does not end the day. It begins another existence. Beneath that incandescent surface, the procession has no intermission. The sharks resume their hunting corridors, the octopuses emerge from their lairs, the moray eels test the darkness with hyperacute nostrils, and somewhere at 200 feet of depth, a 100-year-old green sea turtle that survived the last decades of oceanic change descends toward the reef to sleep, anchored between two corals in a position its ancestors used when humans had not yet invented writing. This ocean is not a spectacle to be watched. It is an argument for existence that the planet makes against forgetting, against distraction, against the idea that we have already seen everything there was to see. French Polynesia is proof that the Earth still holds secrets large enough to change what you believe is possible. And the ocean, patient, immense, indifferent to our priorities, will continue here, building and destroying and rebuilding, long after anyone remembers having come to watch. If this documentary touched something in you, if you felt the weight of the ocean and the urgency to protect it, share it with someone who does not yet know what they are missing. Turn on the notification bell. Every view is a vote for the continuity of this blue world that gave us life before we knew we needed it.